Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today we have a new interview by Palantir's CEO, Alex Karp. Palantir CEO was at the Reagan Defense Forum over the weekend, speaking about defense, military, keeping peace, technology at the intersection of all that. Did not know he was going to give CNBC an interview, but he did. So let's get right into it. We're going to react into this new interview. He said some pretty interesting things, especially regarding their total addressable market. So we'll analyze this stuff as we get into discussing Palantir CEO Alex Karp on America's dominant role in a software world.
Welcome back to Squawk on the Street. Over the weekend, I attended the annual Reagan National Defense Forum out in Simi Valley, California. In the first of a series of interviews that we will be bringing you this week, I caught up with Palantir CEO and co-founder Alex Karp to discuss the data analytics company's role in the war in Ukraine, demand from government as well as commercial customers and businesses, even his reaction to Wall Street's reaction to the stock. Take a listen.
We spent well over a decade, and certainly if you look from inception, building products for peace. So you could distribute vaccines and organize many of the most important institutions in the world. But of course, products of war. We believed and believe, if unlike most of our colleagues in Silicon Valley, if you are strong, you prevent the adversary from acting up, and that's why we thought this war might happen. We build products that allow you to do very high-end AI-enabled targeting. Most of the details we can't discuss, but our adversaries are very, very well aware now of their impact. These products have changed the course of history. They changed the power structure of America. And perhaps most importantly, as a former academic, our adversaries used to run around the world. We have a very significant business outside of America saying, well, America has liberty and entertainment and freedom, but we're better at fighting wars, we're better at building products of war, we're better at internal surveillance. And now, lo and behold, it turns out those of us who are purveyors not just of war products, but of liberty, most importantly, the United States of America, are not only better at entertainment and having fun, we're also better at building products of war. And that narrative, I think, is going to change the world, is already changing the world, because of the many things we're not allowed to say that have happened in the Ukraine, our adversaries know every single one of them. And so we are no longer viewed, America, as just a place that produces the most important articles of liberty, but as a culture that builds the best software.
There's a lot.
So a couple things there that I thought was interesting to analyze. Number one, Karp has been speaking for the past couple of months around this idea that the United States has been innovating when it comes to technology and defense. I think there's two implications to why he's doing this. Number one, he wants to secure more governmental deals, and by him talking very fondly of the United States government being at the, I guess you could say, forefront of technological innovation, he's constantly reiterating this message to people that are listening, and some very important people are listening, that the United States should be ahead, and the United States deserves to be ahead in the first place, especially in the context of everything that's going on geopolitically. So he's constantly reinforcing this message that if the United States is at the top of mind when it comes to technological innovation in the context of mission critical situations and defense, then Palantir should also be at the top of mind as one of the major technological players in that niche. The second thing he's talking about is Ukraine. Obviously, he's making this argument here that adversaries, people that are not that friendly with the United States, like Russia and China, are starting to recognize that the United States is not just a hub of cultural information, right? We don't just export Hollywood as our biggest cultural artifact, but rather we are actually at the cutting edge of technology, and not just technology in terms of Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and social media, but rather technology that actually protects the articles of liberty, as Karp mentions, or the sovereignty that makes America so great, right? The ability for us to understand that we are free and that we have the ability to pursue life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, right? Like these American ideals, Western ideals that are rooted within the fabric of our democracy are protected because we have the defense capabilities to protect them. And so Karp is making a larger philosophical point that the United States is becoming a defense behemoth, and people would say, oh, well, it's already been one. Yeah, it's already been one, but now we're getting into an age where you really have to prove you've got it, because if you don't, you've got someone like Russia and China that can lay claim to that throne, and you don't want adversaries laying claim to that throne.
That builds the best software.
There's a lot I want to pick up on there. I guess the first thing, though, is I see these conversations happening in places like this forum, this idea that we have to move more quickly where things like software and new technologies are concerned. DOD and other entities are not doing enough, or not deploying enough. But then I hear you talk, and it sounds like maybe that's not necessarily the case, at least where Palantir is concerned.
A lot of tech companies are, now they're, not all, but, you just have to, when we had our conversation last year, we were still in a phase where, most software companies, and certainly most companies in Silicon Valley, their basic view is how can we help the adversary while pretending to help America. So first and foremost, what we need to do in America is make sure that everyone, especially in Silicon Valley, is aligned with we are going to give our best products and our best technology to the U.S. government first, not second, fourth, and fifth, while pretending we care because we've got some crazy idea that no one cares about that makes us feel superior to everyone else. That's the most important thing. The U.S. economy, we're seeing this in our software sales in the U.S., and especially the U.S. government. Sure, there's a lot you can complain about, but it is the best at adaptation. We had to fight our way in the DOD. People, because of the size and footprint of our work, they think we're insiders. We see the U.S. government not once, but twice, not to buy Palantir, but to buy the best software, and we won twice. And so the U.S. government has been iterating and adopting and adopting and adopting. Quite frankly, the larger problem is many of our allies are living in the 70s where hardware alone could work and spending all their money on local industry that isn't really that good at software. So I think the onus of us in technology is to really invest. Of course, most companies can't be focused on the U.S. military the way we are because it's core to our mission, but they can't be focused last on the U.S. military and then complain that it's too hard.
Is it changing now because of Ukraine?
Well, there's a lot that's changing. Look, so an already fairly good situation is getting better for technology companies because the U.S. economy and U.S. institutions in general are very pragmatic. They're much less ideological than in other countries. They're like, well, what worked? How did it work? How much did we spend on it, and what were the results? Is a very American way of looking at something. And it is exactly the way you look at tech implementation, whether it's a company or a government. And there's the outside version of what you're allowed to say, but the inside version, with all the data, a lot of which is classified, you see that it is not just a banality that we are in a software world. We are in a software world. And what's also interesting is what is America indisputably the best in the world at doing? Building software. And no one doubts it's interesting. If you ask most Americans, they'll be like, well, we're good at football. We're good at films that I never watch. We have a great finance industry. We're good at, having politicians that none of us really understand. We have a lot of aptitudes, but actually what we're the best at is building software. And it turns out for transforming your industry in hard times and winning against adversaries, it is the single most important thing.
It sort of speaks to what you talked about in your recent letter, which was you've shifted from insurgent outsider to incumbent. This idea of software as a prime. How big is that opportunity for Palantir?
Well, America spends about $800 billion on software. By the way, we're also very big in Britain and a number of other countries. So, to use a term I hate that financial people love, total addressable market, is probably north of $900 billion. And we believe we have the single most important components for adaptive warfare against a large adversary that's willing to allow their troops to die. So exactly what you saw in the Ukraine.
So a couple things there. Let's talk about that. That's going to catch some headlines. I think CNBC ran with that headline as well. Total addressable market of north of $900 billion. When Karp was saying that the U.S. spends $800 billion a year on software, I think there's two levels. Well, first is the government, right? The government has about $700 to $800 billion per year they're spending on defense spending itself. I think Lockheed Martin gets like $100 billion or something of that. Palantir does not get anywhere near that much money, but you could think of it in and of itself, right? If Palantir were able to get even 5% of that $800 billion, that's a lot of money. That's a lot of money in revenues coming to Palantir just from a governmental perspective, not to mention all of the commercial products that they have, not to mention all of the international governmental deals they can get. This UK potentially £400 million deal that they might get with the NHS. I know it's up in waters right now. We talked a little bit about on the channel, but if they're able to get that, then they become the central operating system for the NHS, and it's a snowball effect for more and more deals. So the way I think about Palantir's deal-making capabilities comes in three aspects. U.S. government, which is a big chunk. Then you've got U.S. commercial, which is growing 67% CAGR year over year. And as Karp said, the U.S. is the first to adapt. So it's able to, they're able to get more deals just from the United States in the commercial sector and the private markets. And then third is international commercial / international government. All four of those, when you put those together, and I put international in one bucket so that you could just put them as a third entire pie, all of that can add up to a very large amount of revenues in the next 5-6 years if Palantir is able to actually expand and do what Karp is saying that they're able to do. I mean, a $900 billion TAM, they don't need to get all of that. For, right now the market cap is at 16 billion. They're going to do revenue of about 1.9 billion this year. If they can get to revenues of 10, 20, 30 billion over the next 10 years and do it with a meaningful operating margin, reduce the SBC, and then potentially have a real couple years of like 60-70% year-over-year growth. I know that's kind of crazy to say, but that's what Karp and Teal and Palantir is really selling this vision of. And if they can execute against that, there's a real big shot they win. And Karp always talks like the numbers are sandbagged when they say 30% CAGR. I mean, he's always talking as if this company should be 20 times bigger. He's explicitly said that many times. And so, that's his argument, especially with the geopolitical crises that are going on, AI and warfare. You need the company that is the best at that. Palantir is the best at that by numerous reports. So it's just a question of if they can execute now.
And that the percentage of the 900 billion that we would be able to capture is obviously very large, because pragmatic people are like, well, I could spend 100 billion on something that maybe has marginal impact, that our adversaries, by the way, when you're looking at value, you always have to ask, what is it that I can build the adversary can't build? And there's a lot of things that are going to shift simply because we're building things adversaries can also build. But software, they will not be able to keep up with us. And so more and more of that market is going to come to, not just in Palantir's direction, but in the direction of people that can build software that is useful or critical for warfare.
I mean, we hear so much about China's investment in technologies. You mentioned surveillance states earlier in this conversation. I mean, it's the sort of king surveillance state, case in point, what we've seen play out in terms of protests and at least initial response to those protests in the last couple of days. Can we really counter China when technology and software are concerned? Are we really that much more dominant when they have a different business model and they've been much more aggressive on the government side?
They have a business model to control their citizens, and we will not surpass them at that, and thank God. We have a business model in America to increase liberty at home and to make sure adversaries that attack us or our allies pay a very, very heavy price. We need to stay focused on our business model. If it's about central control, either of economy or of your citizens, they win. If it's about distributed systems where you share information that's crucial for weapons of war with your adversaries, we have a huge advantage. We actually have allies and friends.
Let's talk a little bit about the commercial side of the business, especially when you're talking about technologies that have been applied to, for example, evacuations in Afghanistan being the same type of technologies that are now being purchased by commercial entities.
Well, what we see is that the most important market in the world, the US of A, is also the most adaptive market in the world. Our commercial offering is flying off the shelf. We grew in the last 12 months 102% in the US. America adapts, and will, in the end, buy the single best products on the market. That's why we're succeeding, despite the fact that we're new to this game and by building out a commercial sales force and doing all sorts of things normal companies are doing. Communicating with normal, otherwise adult people is not something we're particularly adept at. But we are very good at building software. The same software use cases that you have in government can be applied to American.
Do you think Wall Street truly understands what Palantir is doing, particularly on the commercial side, particularly given the fact the stock's down something like 60% this year?
Well, I think Wall Street largely understands we're a tech company and punishes all tech companies right now. The interesting thing about Palantir is all of our products historically, whether it's our Intel product, or it's the mapping toggle, it's the AI product that's now changed the world, the product that we built to distribute the vaccine have been 5 years ahead of the market. Our commercial offering is 5 years ahead, 3-4 years ahead of what Wall Street probably understands. Wall Street will very well understand the value of Palantir as they begin to take account of the fact that we're just outstripping everyone with our Foundry product. It will take a while, just like, honestly, when we were talking last year and I was saying, hey, we're going to do A, B, C, D. Well, that looks bad crazy. It's not bad crazy when Russia goes into a country in the software. And this is the exact same thing when it comes to Palantir's full value. And by the way, I would also say Palantir's always been over and undervalued. And clearly we're undervalued, but at some point we'll be overvalued again.
All right, there we go. It's done. Not a bad interview by Palantir's Alex Karp. As you can see at the end, he said a couple things about the stock price. Well, first of all, he said the commercial product is flying off the shelves, which is amazing to hear. They grew 102% in the past 12 months. He's been saying this over the past couple of interviews back in October and November, that their commercial product is working because Foundry is something that American companies can adapt to, and uniquely American companies are good at adapting, which is a reason why commercial is actually doing well. And then about the stock price, I mean, look, he said we're undervalued. And I would agree. Given what Palantir is doing, I would agree. That thing he said about the end about potentially being overvalued one day, that's when Wall Street finally wakes up to it. So, I mean, at $45 at a $100 billion company, they were obviously overvalued. They hadn't even done $1 billion in revenue yet. So now they're going to put in about $1.9 billion this year. We'll see how Q4 goes. And the CEO seems very confident about the commercial product flying off the shelves at $7.50. It doesn't feel like it's overvalued to me. Could it drop lower because of the macro? Of course. Could 2023 be the world's worst recession and Palantir goes to $4? Yes, it could happen. But at some level, if you're long, right? And you DCA when you're long and you decide to make your own decisions. I believe that Palantir's technology, based on the almost 2 years now worth of research I've done on it in comparison to everything else, the thing I've concluded is that the only thing Palantir sucks at is their go-to-market, which they're figuring out. And they're getting a lot better at social, getting a lot better at marketing, getting a lot better at describing the product. Karp's doing a lot more interviews. But the tech is not something that I don't think anyone has questioned if it's good or bad or if it's worse in comparison. Like, it is the thing. And numerous reports in the industry have said it is the thing. The question is now scaling it. And that's a hard thing to do. And that's the thing that can make or break companies. My bet is that they're going to figure that out, because if the product is that good, sales you can figure out. But a crappy product with, good sales, at one point, the chickens come home to roost and you don't really have that good of a product, it's not going to be that valuable. And I think that's what Karp's been saying for the past couple of years. It's like Wall Street doesn't get how good we are. Eventually they will, when the numbers start to reflect that, because they're going to have no choice but to understand that. And this crappy macro is obviously not going to give Palantir the valuation that they deserve, and it shouldn't, because if you're not giving Apple or Facebook or Google the valuation they deserve, you shouldn't be giving it to Palantir. That means there's an opportunity. And whether you're long the stock and you think that's an opportunity to take, that's an individualistic choice. If you think there's more room for pain, that's a choice. But there is an opportunity here. The question is just which way does that opportunity grow? Awesome interview by Palantir's Alex Karp. Thank you guys so much for listening and watching. Please leave your comments below on what you thought about this interview. Merch just launched as well, amitislegit.com. It'll be in the description. Definitely check it out if you want to support the channel. Thank you for listening and watching. I'll see you on the next one.